Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this white, black and green or Abzan colored sacrifice deck featuring Felothar, Dawn of the Abzan as our commander, voted on by my supporters on Patreon. This 3-mana 3/3 Trampler says whenever Felothar enters or attacks, we may sacrifice a non-land permanent. When we do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So Felothar is a pretty interesting build around. We're going to want to include lots of sacrifice fodder, usually cheap expendable creatures that leave another token behind when they die. So we've got multiple creatures to sacrifice as well as creatures to pick up those +1/+1 counters. And then we can lean into some of the +1 counter synergies as well as into the sacrifice synergies that Felothar also provides. So then if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few categories, starting with the aforementioned sacrifice fodder, lots of 1-drops that leave behind a 1/1 token of some variety, and then some 2-drops that can also generate additional tokens for us that we can then sacrifice. Then we've got our removal section, we've got some of the more efficient removal spells in the format, as well as some cards that synergize with our sacrifice theme, such as the Accursed Marauder, and we've got other enchantment-based removal, like Nowhere to Run, that still leaves a permanent behind that we can then also sacrifice to our commander's ability. Then we've got our +1 counter synergies, and these are mostly green cards, as you can see, which will then also get additional +1 counters alongside Felothar. And then we also have some more sacrifice synergies, some creatures like Blood Artist draining the opponent whenever a creature dies. So once we start sacrificing some of our random 1/1s and tokens to Felothar, we can also drain the opponent to death. And we've got some other creatures that allow us to sacrifice stuff at will, so we can also maybe trigger those Blood Artists to get the game over with. And then another nice one is the card draw section, and these mostly include a bunch of 3-drops that can draw cards when creatures enter or die, and those can also work well with our whole sacrifice theme to make sure we don't run out of cards. And then our miscellaneous section has a little bit of mana acceleration. This deck doesn't need a lot of ramp since we really want to curve 1-drop into 2-drop into Felothar, so then ramping doesn't really speed up that curve by any significant margin, but we still have Chrome Mox. Lotho can also leave behind additional treasures that we can maybe sacrifice. And then we've got some nice Planeswalkers topping off our curve. Elspeth is good with our token theme, but can also work well with +1 counters. And then Vraska can also proliferate those counters. And we've got some other Raise the Past type effects, which can also get a whole bunch of creatures back out of the graveyard, so that also ties into our sacrifice theme. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our sacrifice fodder. Lots of white creatures that leave behind. A 1/1 Spirit is usually the best one you can get. We've got Garrison Cat making a soldier, Hunted Witness a life-linking soldier, Nesting Bot can also maybe get our speed up. There's the Novice Inspector and Thraben Inspector, which generate a clue when they enter the battlefield, which we can also maybe sacrifice to Felothar. Then there's Infestation Sage making a flying insect. Nested Shambler makes a number of squirrels equal to its power when it dies, so can also maybe benefit from picking up additional +1 counters first. We've got the Linkbreaker making a mercenary, and then the Hex Mage comes attached to a cursed roll token, and we can sacrifice the roll to Felothar to be left with a 3/2 with additional +1/+1 counters, so that can also be very nice. And then in green we've got the Thalet leaving behind a Saproling. At 2 mana there's Carrot Cake. When we play it and when we sacrifice it we get to make a rabbit and scry one, so that also can be sacrificed to Felothar. We'll first get the rabbit token and then get all the extra +1/+1 counters. Voice of Victory can also attack with Mobilize, and then we can attack with Felothar at the same time, sacrificing a warrior token to Felothar's ability to pump the team. We've got Jadar making a zombie token each turn, which we can also maybe sacrifice. The Marionette Apprentice also fits into our whole sacrifice theme, draining the opponent when our creatures die, and when it enters we can also make a servo token, so it still curves into Felothar quite nicely if we maybe don't have any of our 1-drops that we can sacrifice. And then the Wriggling Grub will leave behind a pair of worm tokens. The Basking Brutescale ideally has something else alongside it we can sacrifice, but once it picks up a +1/+1 counter it will also make an Eldrazi spawn token, which we can then maybe sacrifice in the future. And the Springheart Nantuko, even if we're not going to bestow it very often in this deck, can still leave behind additional insect tokens with a landfall, so that's additional sacrifice fodder for the deck. Then our removal includes Swords to Plowshares and Fatal Push. These are staples in any black and or white deck. Then we've got Bone Shards, can also maybe sack a creature as an additional cost to remove an opposing creature or planeswalker. Grim Bauble leaves behind an artifact to give a creature -2/-2 until end of turn. It's also good to sacrifice to our commander. Same with Momentum Breaker, making the opponent sacrifice a creature, and Nowhere to Run can give a creature -3/-3. Can also ignore Ward and Hexproof going forward if we leave it in play. Then there's a Haywire Might to blow up artifacts and enchantments that aren't creatures. We've got the Accursed Marauder, can make the opponent sacrifice a non-token when it enters, and then can also maybe later get it back out of the graveyard, plays well with our other sacrifice cards. And then Grave Pact makes it so whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent has to sacrifice a creature of their choice as well, usually pretty good in this style of deck. Then we move on to our +1 counter synergies, where Hardened Scales is the cheapest and most effective way to increase the number of +1 counters we get from Felothar. At 2 mana, we've got some creatures with a similar effect, with a Winding Constrictor and Conclave Mentor. We also have Botanical Brawler, which benefits from other creatures picking up counters, and then in turn it will do the same on a 2/2 Trampler, basically. Then there's a Falconer, which can give all creatures that have +1 counters on them flying, so that can be an excellent finisher if there's a bit of a board stall. The Kami can also enhance the number of counters we get, and then can also generate additional mana based on its power. Abzan Ascendancy can first put +1 counters on the entire team, and then whenever a non-token creature dies, we get to make a Flying Spirit, so that also kind of ties the sacrifice synergies together with the +1 counter synergies. Ouroboros is just the best green +1 counter card that's been printed in recent memory, so that can also help us go over the top. And then a Revival of the Ancestors makes 3 1/1 spirits, can then distribute 3 counters, and finally can give the team Trample and Lifelink, but maybe we'll sacrifice the Saga to Felothar before we get to Chapter 3 and still get the most out of it. And then there's Daedrine, which can also enter with a bunch of counters on it, and then we can maybe remove a few counters from our creatures when we attack to make another robot token and draw a card, so that also synergizes quite well. Then we move on to our sacrifice synergies, where we have the classic Blood Artist, which will also trigger off opposing creatures dying, whereas Vengeful Blood Witch, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Cruel Celebrant only drain the opponent when our creatures die. And then the Pilgrim can gain life when our creatures enter, and also drains the opponent when our creatures die on a 2/2 Death Touch. We have some sacrifice outlets with the Umbral Caller Zealot letting us surveil one, and we also have Bartolome, as well as our Cartel Aristocrat. So these can all sacrifice creatures at will, can sacrifice as many as we want, which can then also maybe trigger our Blood Artists or maybe draw cards with our next section. And then we also have Serve on Dame, which can also pick up additional counters when our creatures die. When it leaves the battlefield, we can also maybe deal with an opposing non-land permanent. Then we've got our card draw engines, where I finally found a deck where I can include Assemble the Players to look at the top card of my library, and then once each turn I can cast a creature with power 2 or less from the top of my library, and most of the deck will meet that description, so we can cast even some of our 3 and 4 drops will have power 2 or less that we can cast. Then there's a Dusk Legion Duelist. Whenever it picks up a +1 counter for the first time each turn, we get to draw. Perfect alongside Felothar if we start out with an expendable 1-drop. Then there's Deadly Dispute, can just sack any of our creatures or artifacts to draw to make a treasure. We've got Enduring Innocence. Whenever a smaller creature enters, we get to draw. Even if it dies, it will turn into an enchantment. And then we've got the Grim Haruspex, Midnight Reaper, and Terrillax, which will all draw cards whenever a non-token creature dies. And then we also have the Morbid Opportunist, saying whenever any creature dies, we get to draw a card. It can only trigger once each turn. And then finally we've got some mana acceleration with Chromox and Arcane Signet in artifact form. Lotho, whenever a player casts a second spell, makes a treasure. Even if it costs us 1 life, it's usually worth it. And then we've got some mass graveyard recursion with Raise the Past and Rally the Ancestors. Raise the Past only gets back 1 and 2 drops, but they will stay in play, whereas Rally the Ancestors can also maybe get back our 3 drops, so we can draw a few extra cards. But here we would like to have some sacrifice outlets alongside it to make sure we can sacrifice a bunch of our creatures before they get exiled at the beginning of our next upkeep. So this one can be a little bit trickier to set up, but the payoff can be enormous if we've got the right board state and a nice full graveyard. And then we've got some Planeswalkers with Elspeth, also doubling the number of tokens we generate, and can also make additional tokens or give the team +1 counters and flying. And then Vraska can also maybe proliferate those +1 counters we got from Felothar, and can also be a nice source of card advantage that's maybe harder for controlling decks to interact with, as opposed to a bunch of creatures that might get swept up. And then the mana base has a few utility lands, can channel Eiganjo, Takenuma, and Boseiju for additional interaction when needed. And then the Great City can also maybe exchange creatures from our graveyard for additional spirit tokens. And the Dalkovan Encampment can also help us generate some attacking warrior tokens, which can also maybe be paired with some of our sacrifice synergies. Otherwise, I'm going pretty light on the Surveil lands, only have the Shadowy Backstreet, so I'm avoiding including too many tap lands, since this is really a deck that wants to curve 1, 2 into 3, so then we can't afford to play any tap lands in the early turns. The fetch lands can also help fix our colors, of course, and then we've got Starting Town and Command Tower making all 3 colors, so those can also come in handy. I did experiment with including a few more Surveil lands, so you might see those throughout some of the games, but I did end up cutting them pretty soon. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Samut, so Gruul aggro with lots of haste creatures. Our hand features some nice Yargle-themed removal, but I'm missing a creature that I want to sacrifice to Felothar, so I don't think this is good enough. This is better. So I want to get a green-white dual land. Opponent off to a nice start with the Chromox, so they can already play a turn 2 Samut. Although we have a Fatal Push now. So, yeah, it's a little awkward, because I'm going to want to fetch a green source, but I also want to be able to maybe Fatal Push Samut, so then I won't have any green. Yeah, maybe for now I just play Thraben Inspector and let Samut hit me. And then next turn I can Fatal Push with Revolt while still getting a green source. Because I'm gonna need double green for Ouroboros. Alright, Bone Shards is also an answer. Could do that instead. Although there's nothing I actively want to discard or sacrifice. So I think I still go for Fatal Push. And then we'll wait until their turn. Bloodbraid Elf cascades into Urabrask Forge. It's a lot of haste creatures. Can block the 1/1 token from Forge. But yeah, they had a nice hit with the Bloodbraid. Make sure to fetch. And then green-whites should be fine since we have Urborg coming in. Can Surveil. Really want another green source here, ideally. Alright, so I can play Felothar versus I can go Brawler plus Bone Shards, or could even Deadly Dispute to be able to play Ouroboros next turn. I kind of like Felothar. The problem is if I sack the clue now, then next turn I don't have anything I actively want to be sacrificing. So it is a tricky turn. So that kind of makes me lean away from Felothar, and then I can go Deadly Dispute plus Brawler. Ideally if we find a land, otherwise I don't want to use my treasure. Dispute sacking the clue. So let me do that now. Alright, found a forest, so yeah, now I'm fine playing the Brawler out. Could attack for 1, but maybe there's a world where we want to represent a double block. Could use a bit more sacrifice fodder for Felothar. Opponent gets in with everyone, and yeah, don't have the best set of blocks. So I'm gonna take it. Thallot's good too. So do we prefer Thallot plus Felothar or just slam down Ouroboros? I think Ouroboros. And then now we've got a nice large brawler that can hopefully get in the way. Opponent with a Godric, which can probably fly over here. And a Screaming Nemesis, which punishes me for blocking it. And our opponent's just jamming. So, can take out Samut, or we can just block it like so. Take 7. That's reasonable. Preserve my threats. Although... yeah, I could also just take out Samut because it does have Vigilance if we want to set up an attack on the way back. Although is there any way I can present lethal? Yeah, I can go Thalid into Felothar, get more counters. So I might be better off trading the Inspector, although that's an extra creature that gets counters from Ouroboros. So I think this is still the block I want to make. And then ideally draw an untapped land. Okay. So can go Thalid into Felothar and then still Bone Shard Samut. Not sure if this is going to be enough. But this is all I've got. Well, that's Jin-Gitaxias, so it doesn't get any closer. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a hand that does not have a 1-drop. Some decent 2s, and then no third land facing Jin-Gitaxias, so mono blue. Well, Voice of Victory would be nice to resolve, makes their counter spells obsolete. So I think this has enough upside where I'm okay trying it. Turn 1 opt, so opponent's gonna be tapped out. Since there are a few counter spells that could get to voice, Spell Snare, Stern Scolding comes to mind. So now no more counters. Opponent's got a Ledger Shredder. We can't find a third land, so that's an issue. Can surveil or scry with a Carrot Cake. For now I can still attack. And look for land 3. Well, it's a tap land. Are we okay with that? It's better than nothing. Although it's still not ideal. Lets me play the Brute Scale. Yeah, I feel like if I decline and then fail to find a land, we pretty much lose. A Vexing Bauble countering free spells, but our opponent's just gonna cycle it. Okay, so now play Brute Scale, I think. Can still attack with a voice. And then Felothar can maybe sack the Carrot Cake. Or we could play its second main, sacking a warrior token, so we have some options. And then in Death Atrium, another tap land. At this point I'll take. Would have been a fine land to play on turn 1, and then Cemetery would have been untapped. Okay, Mana Geode sets up Jin-Gitaxias on the following turn, or they might double spell to trigger a Ledger Shredder. Okay, so I think Felothar sack Carrot Cake. Make sure to get a rabbit before the counter. And then I'll keep another land so we can maybe play Vraska next turn. Make another token. And go to attackers. And then we can next turn sack a warrior token to Felothar's ability. And hope they can bounce all my stuff. At least we now have the lands to redeploy our creatures. Okay, the One Ring will protect him. So, can still grow my team. But I wouldn't be dealing any damage. But yeah, Voice of Victory has presumably been doing a lot of work for us. So, can start by attacking. And then Vraska can be deployed. So don't have to attack with anything else. And then sacrifice. Make another spawn. Fetch a swamp. And play full loyalty Vraska. And we're just gonna draw and proliferate. Could also proliferate the One Ring counters so they lose more life, but then they also get to draw more cards, so that seems a bit risky. Alright, so they need something like Cyclonic Rift or River's Rebuke. A Rift they have to cast in their own turn as well. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Shilgengar, Sire of Famine. 6/6, sacrifices other creatures to make blood. And then can sack 6 blood to reanimate every creature from their graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, our hand is a little lackluster, missing a third land. Won't be able to curve out smoothly. This seems better. Can even Grim Bauble turn 1. Now I can go Signet plus Bauble if needed. Have a good amount of removal. And now the Terminus for ramp. Okay, so could play the Pilgrim. I don't think I'm necessarily playing Felothar first chance I get, and with a Signet we could ramp out Ouroboros next turn. So we'll see how things line up. Connections, yeah, wouldn't be able to touch that one either. So things aren't really lining up the way I'd like. There's not much I want to sack to Felothar. Ouroboros unlikely to survive, but it might be my best play. Because yeah, playing Momentum Breaker to make them discard isn't very effective. But not getting counters on more than one creature is also not ideal. If by some miracle they can't remove it, we can snowball. Arcane Signet. Another Signet. So they are ramping quite a bit. Losing life to their painful bond. And now Bitter Triumph. Opponent is down to 12 from all that life loss. And we found a Winding Constrictor. So now Bauble into Felothar looks a bit more appealing. Definitely an efficient play. Could also go Bauble, Constrictor, Pilgrim. And wait another turn on Felothar. And then have multiple creatures that can attack next turn. Bonus down to 9. Refusing to make another 3/2 token. Steel Seraph we can answer. And a Trawler. Graveyard's gone. So then Momentum Breaker, Marauder. As opposed to going Wriggling Grub into Marauder, sack the Grub. Or we could Momentum Breaker into Felothar. Get a bunch of counters, but then they get to gain life on the swing back. I think we just want to avoid that. Hit you for 4. They lose more life to their connections, at least 1. And then, if they cast anything cheap, they also lose life from the Painful Bond. Right, it's gonna be the Duskbringer. Does have lifelink. And a Celebrant. So I imagine we want to get Felothar down. Could go Celebrant into Felothar. And then I get a pair of counters. So if I attack, they'll have to block. They gain 4. But then we get a Celebrant trigger as well. So they're at 1, and they gotta lose at least 1 to the connections. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Gyruda, so likely a self-mill clone deck. We have a sword, so that can take care of Gyruda. Some early creatures. Just missing land number 3. Opponent's ramping. And, yeah, gotta fetch a green source. Probably Temple Garden with this hand. And let's go for maybe the Apprentice. If we draw land 3, I can start with Felothar, or we can take a slower approach with the Enduring Innocence. Opponent keeps up 4 mana. Also possible they have a counterspell. In which case I could double spell Pilgrim with Garrison Cat to at least get something in play. Yeah, let's take it slow. Feels like they are keeping up something. And they're gonna Otawara bounce the Pilgrim. Fair enough. Now is a turn where we probably need to keep up Swords to Plowshares, otherwise our opponent can maybe copy Gyruda a bunch of times. So then, still go for Pilgrim again. Opponent channels. Revealing some scary creatures, Jin-Gitaxias and the Mirror. Alright, so each player mills 4. I guess I have to respond to the trigger and hope they don't mill something scarier, because if they hit a clone, I don't really have a window to respond to it. So Metamorph can copy my creature, or they can grab a Voice of Victory. Opponent's gonna clone the Pilgrim. Now we can finally get Felothar down, and then that seems like the play. Can sack a Doom Traveler, so we'll start flying over as well. And I'm fine with any trades, probably for the Apprentice. They can auto replay Gyruda unless they've got some free mana. A Gelatinous Cube. Exiles Felothar. Yeah, I guess we send it back to the command zone here. Can maybe recast it if we draw land. Now... yeah, bestowing doesn't do much when I don't have landfall. Still have an attack with Pilgrim and a Flyer. Maybe just Enduring Innocence here, and then next turn I'll at least be able to draw a card. Could also send in Garrison Cat, because if they take it out, I will at least get a token in return, at which point I may as well attack all out. Then they're probably just blocking the token instead of the cat, but then I get in for 2 more damage. Yeah, let's go for it. Opponent's at 6, falls to 5. But now they could recast Gyruda with the mirror, although that's going to put him to 3. Have more aristocrats in hand that can maybe get the job done. Okay, opponent's flickering Gelatinous Cube. Taking care of the Pilgrim this time. And Operative can copy it. So yeah, opponent's got some plays even outside of Gyruda. Now I get to go Nantuko. Probably without bestowing it, just playing it. Well, I guess there's no downside to bestowing it. Onto maybe the flying token. And then I get to play Celebrants. Assemble from parts on Metamorph, okay. Get to make another 1/1. And get in for 3. And then next turn, Felothar can maybe get the job done. I guess now they're gonna copy the cube, get rid of my token. The opponent just copied the token. Maybe that's a misclick and they intended to copy the cube, but they just clicked on the spirit first. But yeah, let's assume our opponent copies cube, exiles my token. We still get the Nantuko back, and then opponent could maybe attack for 2, in which case we can easily trade. They gain 2 but lose 1. And then next turn between Blood Witch, I guess if we play Blood Witch we cannot play Felothar, but just playing Felothar and pumping the team is pretty good. So I feel like they probably would have died soon enough. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Ghalta, a green Stompy. So don't expect a ton of removal, but we will be facing a 12/12 Trample. I guess Death Touch lines up reasonably well. Cannot quite play turn 1 Nesting Bot, but can play it with a Signet. This sounds okay. Could use some actual removal. And then an extra land wouldn't hurt. Could assemble for a bit of card advantage. Kami can make extra mana. Probably play that before we Felothar. And Rofellos, alright, that needs to be answered with our Nowhere to Run now. And then I can still play a Shambler. But yeah, that kind of throws off our curve. But if I don't deal with Rofellos, it's gonna basically win the game next turn with the amount of mana it generates. Now I can sack Nowhere to Run to Felothar and not feel bad about it. Kazandu Mammoth is acceptable. Okay, so Felothar or Kami. If I Kami first, next turn I can maybe tap it for 3 mana, but that still doesn't cast a whole lot. So I think we jam Felothar. So next turn I can maybe attack past the Mammoth. There's maybe an argument for sacking one of my creatures and then next turn sacking Nowhere to Run when we play the Kami. Opponent actually had a fight spell here. So goodbye Felothar. Yeah, that's rough. A land is good at least. So Kami gets me closer to replaying Felothar. Still don't have any great attacks. Sure. And this one can Surveil. Because now if I go to sack a creature when we play Felothar, that creature basically gains Summoning Sickness because a token can't attack yet. Although it doesn't look like I would be in a position to make any attacks. 5/5 Mammoth discounts Ghalta to 7, so still a bit short. 3 unknowns in hand. So I'm wondering what those are. Godless Shrine we can keep. Okay, I guess I try Felothar now. Sack the Shambler. And then I can still play Voice thanks to the Kami. And then next turn we get to make a pretty decent attack. I guess Shambler makes squirrels equal to its power, so it's more than 1. So that was maybe a reason to get the counter on it first. So there's a Ghalta. Now we just need to go wide enough to ignore it. So I can... let's see here. Maybe play Assemble first, see what's on top. Bone Shard, so that can answer Ghalta next turn. Play Brute Scale, can adapt and still play Pilgrim, start there I guess. And how does an all-out attack look like? I think that's reasonable. I'll sacrifice a spawn as opposed to one of the mobilized tokens, just to get maximum damage. Okay, so they've got 2 blocks, one profitable, one's a chum block. And that's Xaxes, awesome. I guess we would have even more damage with Pilgrim end of turn. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Golbez, blue-black artifacts. My hand is functional. We'll need land number 3. We'll start by getting black-whites. And then probably green-white soon enough. So might want to start with Bloodstained Mire. Now Thraben Inspector is also an option. Yeah, I guess I'll play the Inspector. That way I can actually attack with a creature that gets counters the same turn we play Felothar. Could also get black-green, since we do have Grave Pact in the deck. And then I'm not in a hurry to play Momentum Breaker, because if I can draw third lanes for Felothar, I can just attack past it. Now Chromox. If I miss my lane drop next turn, I'll have to decide between Momentum Breaker or maybe sacking the Clue. Opponent says no to a Grimbauble. Prototype can also make an extra mana. And the Reality Chip. Alright, found the lanes. Now I still have multiple options. Felothar is the most straightforward one, and then next turn I can maybe play the Kami to get more counters. Could also play the Kami first, and then next turn Felothar, sack the Clue. Kami can immediately tap for 3 mana. Could work out better. Because if I sack the Clue now to grow the Brawler, I would have to sack the Inspector next turn if I don't draw a land for Nesting Bot. So their opponent's going to be getting creatures back out of the graveyard, and yeah, this Demonic Junker is pretty good. Takes out my Kami. That's too bad. So, now what? Still don't love Momentum Breaker, because now they just sack Reality Chip and get it back. So it's one of my 3s. I feel like I need to get some cards flowing. So I probably go for either Relax or Opportunist. Relax I can play at instant speed, so that has its advantages. And then next turn I can Felothar, maybe sack Inspector for starters. If they reconfigure Reality Chip, Momentum Breaker looks a bit better. But now they have a crab they can sacrifice. And they're gonna reconfigure onto it. Play a free Bauble off the top. So they are seeing a lot of cards with all these Surveil triggers. And the Thopterus can now be returned. Okay, time to start beating down, I think. Unless I want to first go for Momentum Breaker. But I think we gotta start applying some pressure. And hopefully draw into a lane. Alright, so I can still cast another 1-drop here. Relax as Menace. Get Temple Garden. Thopterist making Ornithopters each turn is quite strong. Now Ghost Vacuum can maybe interfere with some of our graveyard synergies. And how about an Urza off the top, thanks to Reality Chip? Yeah, that's probably the turning point in this game. 7/7 token. Can now make all the mana they want, cast more off the top. And then if they surveil a creature into the graveyard, they get to return it. Could still maybe top deck a Falconer to give my team flying. That could maybe help cross the finish line. And there's a flyer now too. And they'll be getting back the Spy Bug, and Familiar makes me discard. Yeah, I don't think Momentum Breaker's doing much for me. So that can probably go. They still have 2 blue mana for Thopterist. And return the Spybug. Haywire Might can blow up artifacts, but not artifact creatures. So I guess I could get rid of the reality chip right now. Is that the best I can do? Does this exile? It does, so they wouldn't be able to get it back at least. I can either go for that, or I can go Opportunist, Nesting Bot, attack, sack Nesting Bot, draw 2 cards, and hope to get there by pure attrition. Although they do have 1 profitable block available for Felothar, presumably. We would also grow the Brawler a bit more. Yeah, I think we go Nesting Bot, Opportunist. Opponent's holding priority. I guess they could have a 1 mana instant they get to cast. A bounce spell on Felothar would be pretty backbreaking. So we get 5 counters, so at least enough to trade for the construct as it stands. So we are getting some damage in at least. And then I can still play the mites. Alright, let's see what happens. If they can take an extra turn, it's probably game over. We're facing at least 5 in the air. It's gonna be a Bolas Citadel, alright, go big or go home. But I think they've got enough permanents in play where they can just use the second mode here, sack 10 non-land permanents, lose 10 life, and combined with an attack that should be lethal. Yeah, close one. Opponent's just having fun now. Gets to find another 1-mana artifact. Mox Amber. But yeah, they've got plenty of stuff they can sacrifice now. So the hidden mode of Bolas' Citadel is gonna get there. Doesn't always come up. So we'll see if our opponent knows about it. They're getting in with the flyers, so I assume we're dead here. Yeah, opponent's now hovering over the Citadel, so I think they figured it out. GG's. We do get to draw a card on the way out, but that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Tannuk, red-green Landfall. Got an explosive opener with Chrome Mox. Falconer to get flying could be useful if there's a bit of a board stall. So, yeah. Might save Chrome Mox to play after we play Lotho. I do still want some sack fodder in place. I'm still running out the Nesting Bot. So ideally find another card I can pitch to Chrome Mox, and yeah, Serve on Dam might be it. So get a black-green land. Attack, and then I can go Lotho into Chrome Mox. Could also decline to imprint something just to make the treasure. Since we are kind of light on action. And then I can still sack the Chromox to Felothar. I don't actually hate that plan. So I'll decline and pass. Otherwise, pitching Falconer could have let me play Servondame. But I feel like the flying from Falconer is going to be useful too. And how about a Grave Pact? Now I cannot fetch another black source with Foothills, because I ended up cutting some of the Surveil lanes. Just have the black-white Surveil left. But this seems like a good Felothar turn. And then I guess our opponent played Yavimaya, so I don't even have to sacrifice here. So Felothar. And then sack the useless Chromox. Hit you for 3. Now Provisioner and Jadar. So we can once again double spell if I don't trust Auto Tapper. So Jadar into Servondame. Can attack and sack a Nesting Bot. Keep the treasure to maybe set up Grave Pact. Opponent takes it, falls to 11. So this Falconer's looking pretty good. Ooh, Strip Mine. Can still cast a Falconer if they blow up my land. But they can maybe blow it up twice. Opponent just sacking the Analysts, making some more treasure. 4 mana remains. And there's Tannuk. Well, we might have had a aggressive enough start here to go underneath the landfall synergies. But yeah, next turn with Falconer, our entire team flies, and we can easily deal 11 onto the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand is not perfect, missing a third land mostly, since I won't have access to all 3 colors. But I guess we don't need green right away. Facing a Tezzeret artifact deck. So Momentum Breaker may not be at its best either, but I'll still give it a shot. Alright, perfect. So start by getting Godless Shrine. Play Nesting Bots. And this will be entering untapped. Haywire Might is going to be decent too. So we can either play Bartolome or assemble the players if we want to go for the card advantage move. Probably not going to slam down Felothar on 3, although it is a possibility. Yeah, you know what, let's add some pressure. If they have a counterspell, I would rather not get my enchantment countered. Demolition Field could hit us as well. For now, don't hate Morbid Opportunists. Get Temple Garden. And attack. Could sacrifice something now just to draw a card. I think I can wait. And Demolition Field will hit Godless Shrine. In that case, I probably need to get a Plains, so I can still cast Felothar. Opponent can get a Swamp. And the game goes on. Talisman resolves. Can maybe blow it up with a Might. And then still play Thraben Inspector as well. Start by attacking. This also draws with Opportunist. And then next turn we'll maybe play Felothar. They do still have a bunch of mana up once again, so it's possible they're holding onto a counterspell, in which case flashing in our menace creature here might be the play. Can also draw with a Deadly Dispute. Have a few options. Now let's just attack, see what happens. And then I'll pass. Can flash this in end of turn, maybe sack the nesting bot to draw 2. Opponent did indeed have a counterspell. Could be convinced to play this now and then immediately sack something, but I guess Arena didn't hold priority for us. A reality chip is acceptable. Yeah, I can try this now, and then if they counter, I get to resolve Felothar. Could be worth it to sack something here, like the nesting bot to draw 2, to try and hit my lane drop. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up. That's a lot of card advantage coming our way. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the Cruelclaw, a pretty powerful deck if it can connect with Cruelclaw, especially with haste. This hand is missing a third land, pretty far from casting our Grave Pact or Vraska. This is a bit better. So we've got Hexmage into Blood Witch, sack the roll to Felothar. And it's also good that we can present early blockers for their menace creature. So I can start by getting black-white. It's gonna cost us a bit of life now, but it's gonna save us a lot of damage in the long run compared to having to pay 1 to our pain lanes each turn. Opponent's got removal. That makes Felothar less exciting here. Still kind of tempted to play creatures, so we can maybe double block Cruelclaw. Since, yeah, next turn they get to play it. Could maybe flash this in to ambush a double block. Could also assemble the players, start playing off the top. But this game is not so much about card advantage as it is about preventing my opponent from comboing. I'll go for Blood Witch, the more mana efficient play. And yep, opponent's gonna be able to give Cruelclaw haste. I think we let them attack if they want to, and then try and set up an ambush. Still gonna be a trade, but a trade I'm willing to make. And get some triggers. Problem is, next turn they can just replay it for 5. So we need to be able to present more blockers. Did not draw another land. Can go Traveler plus Duelist, or I guess Traveler plus Apprentice would be fine too. If we weren't staring down Cruelclaw with haste, I would maybe take my time with Enduring Innocence first. And wow, opponent scoops it up. I guess if they can't connect with Cruelclaw, their deck doesn't work. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Muldrotha, so Sultai Graveyard. My hand is not particularly exciting. I can play turn 1 Might, turn 2 Aristocrat, Ascendancy or Felothar, but there's nothing I actively want to sacrifice. So I think I mulligan this. This hand's a little bit better, although I'm missing green for turn 1 Thallid. I think I still keep it. Maybe hope to get there with a treasure from Lotho. Small chance my opponent casts 2 spells next turn. Just noticed they are also playing with Gyruda as companion, so only evenly costed cards. Did end up finding my green source. So now Zealot plus Thallid looks fine. And then Grave Pact is going to be pretty tough for the opponent to beat if they don't have enchantment removal, which they just played with Feed the Swarm. Just need to keep drawing more creatures we can sacrifice to enable the Grave Pact. And Jadar's excellent for that purpose. So I don't think I'm in a hurry to play Felothar yet. Can just go Jadar plus Blood Witch. And hope there's no board wipe. Would have to be pretty much a Damnation as an evenly costed sweeper. It's gonna be a Groundbreaker instead. Okay. So Grave Pact can clear a path. Can just sack the Decayed Zombie here. And attack all out. And then next turn finally play Felothar, maybe sacking the Thallid. Can sack another zombie at instant speed. If they were to play Muldrotha. Puts Gyruda in hand. And Panharmonicon. End of turn fetch. And now a Mentor's not bad either. Can play it. Play Felothar. Never mind, I guess we don't have enough green and white for that to work. Was there a way I could have tapped better? Not quite. Alright. That's alright. I think we might still have lethal. Because I can just sack a bunch of creatures to the Zealots and finish them off with the Blood Witch. But yeah, I guess playing Felothar would have been a little bit faster. And our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Wylie Duke, a deck that's going to be probably crewing a bunch of vehicles or saddling some creatures to tap it down. We've got some early interaction, bit of ramp. Could swords the birds. Yeah, maybe that's better than keeping swords for Wylie. Because they can eventually recast it. And the birds is going to do a lot of work in the meantime. Turn to Signet plus Sage, most likely. Opponent with a Voice of Resurgence also would have been good to exile. Now, still going to go with Signet plus Sage. Could also keep it to play after we play Innocence, but next turn I can go Innocence. Well, I guess we're still a bit short of Innocence plus Cutthroat, so I guess we'll wait. I'm not in a hurry to get the Infestation Sage down. And this could shape up to be a pretty grindy matchup, with both players drawing a few extra cards. Opponent waiting on Wylie, maybe they want to tap it right away. Forest or Plains, so make sure to play that first. And then we have Urborg, so all my lands tap for black. Possible they can exile the Innocence in response here. Alright, we get to draw. but a Get Lost will hit our Enduring Innocence, would have drawn a card either way. Now Ancient Tomb's a good one. Not the best in our deck where we have a triple colored commander without any generic costs. And yeah, Witch Enchanter can now blow up our Innocence enchantment. Still took a lot of resources to get rid of it. Now, seems like a good time for Felothar. We also have these beautiful map tokens we can sacrifice. So if I were to play Felothar, I can still play Cutthroat alongside it. So let's do that. Make sure we have the right colors here. Always good to double check, never trust the auto tapper. And then next turn sink a bunch of mana into Diadrine. Do I attack and trade for Enchanter? I think we wait to make our Sage a bit bigger. Now Strip Mine as well, alright. Goes for Caves. Not the end of the world. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, they just wanted to prove a point. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Sami. Affinity for artifacts. Once they get it down, can be a pretty scary commander. Our hand's lacking a 1-drop, but I think I still keep. Starts with Interlacer and an artifact land. So once they get Sami down, they get to discount by 2. Found a Hex Mage, that's nice. So now fetch up Godless Shrine. And that's why curving out in this deck is so important. Having a 1-drop that we're happy to sacrifice to Felothar lets us curve out much better. Opponent will draw. Expect some ramp next turn, so they can get their commander down a little sooner. For now, Brute Scale will benefit the most from Felothar next turn. Bartolomew's going to be better alongside the Opportunist. And there's a Signet. Alright, so still going to go for Felothar. Hope it doesn't get removed right away. Start by sacking the Cursed Roll. Get some counters. And smash. Possible our opponent's packing some board wipes. We're about to find out. For now, another tapped artifact land, triggers Interlacer. And a Chromatic Lantern. So next turn, they could cast Sami and potentially cast some colorless spells for free. Because it's any spell has affinity, not just artifacts. But they will sack the Interlacer to maybe make sure. Alright, so what's the best I can do here? Can go Sage plus Opportunists. And just sack the Sage at this point. Make another spawn. Is this lethal? It looks like it. Alright, so a very nice curve out draw. Got it done thanks to that early Hex Mage. Alright, so we get to see this Abzan sacrifice deck in action, and there's definitely a few ways to approach Felothar. Can lean more into the +1 counter synergies, or you can go for more of a sacrifice deck. We ended up somewhere in between to hopefully get the best of both worlds, but that also means we're maybe diluting some of the counter synergies and some of the sacrifice synergies by not going all out on either one. But of course our commander kind of wants us to lean into both types of synergies, so I feel like we ended up somewhere in the middle. So that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.